When a waitress nobody noticed stepped forward to save a billionaire's collapsing $500 million deal, she exposed a brutal truth that would shatter everything he believed about success. What happened next changed 3 lives forever. Harrison Blake had built his empire on one unshakable principle: control everything, trust no one, depend on nobody. At 42, he'd turned a small software startup into a $3 billion technology colossus. He'd negotiated deals across 6 continents, outmaneuvered competitors twice his size, and never, not once in 20 years, had he walked into a meeting unprepared. Until today, his fingers trembled as he stared at his phone, reading the message for the 3rd time. Emergency landing in Denver. All flights grounded indefinitely. I can't make it. I'm so sorry, Harrison. Richard Beaumont, his translator for 2 decades. The man who'd been with him through every major international deal. The one person Harrison had allowed himself to rely on. Now stuck 1,500 miles away in an airport terminal, unavailable for the most important meeting of his career. This can't be happening, Harrison muttered in the backseat of his Mercedes. Outside, Seattle moved past in blurred streaks of grey and rain. Not today. Not this meeting. His driver James glanced in the rearview mirror but said nothing. After 12 years, he knew when silence was the only acceptable response. Harrison's thumb moved frantically across his phone, calling every translation service in the Pacific Northwest. Each call ended the same way. "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake, but all our Mandarin specialists are booked. We could arrange something for next week." Next week. As if 5 years of planning, 17 trips to Beijing, and tens of millions in preliminary investments could be postponed because of mechanical failure. Li Chen didn't do postponements. The Chinese investor was notorious. She'd walked away from a $2 billion deal because the CEO arrived 10 minutes late. A man who cannot control his schedule cannot control a company, she'd told the press. That CEO's stock value dropped 40% within a week, and now Harrison was about to face her without a translator, without the ability to communicate the nuances that made his proposal special, without the one critical element that made this deal possible. His executive team had warned him this was dangerous, everything on one meeting with one investor on one specific day. But Li Chen had been clear. She was in Seattle for exactly 48 hours. She would meet him once, at her chosen location and time. If he impressed her, they'd move forward with a partnership that would revolutionize healthcare technology worldwide. If he didn't, her $500 million would go to a competitor. The car pulled up at Westlake Prime, the upscale steakhouse Li Chen had insisted upon. Harrison had questioned the choice. Why not his corporate office? Why not a conference room with presentation equipment? But Li Chen's assistant had been firm. "Ms. Li believes you learn more about a person in a public space than in a boardroom where everyone performs." So she was testing him before the negotiation even started. Harrison stepped out, and October rain immediately soaked his $1,500 suit. He didn't bother with an umbrella. He was too distracted trying to salvage what was becoming the worst day of his professional life. Inside, the restaurant lived up to its reputation. Dark wood paneling, soft lighting, the quiet murmur of wealthy diners conducting business over aged beef and expensive wine. Staff moved like shadows, present when needed, invisible when not. "Mr. Blake." The hostess recognized him immediately. "Your party hasn't arrived yet. Your table is ready." "I need your manager," Harrison said, voice tight with controlled panic. "Immediately." The hostess's professional smile flickered. "Of course, sir. Is something wrong?" "Just get the manager now." Within seconds, Marcus Reinhardt appeared. "Mr. Blake, how can I help you?" Harrison pulled him aside. "I need someone who speaks Mandarin. Fluent, professional level, anyone on staff." Marcus blinked. "Sir, we have Spanish speakers. One knows some French, but Mandarin specifically." "Think harder," Harrison interrupted, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. My translator is stranded in Denver. I have the most important meeting of my career, starting in 90 minutes. I need someone who won't embarrass me in front of an investor who could buy this restaurant without noticing the expense." Marcus's expression shifted to genuine concern. "Mr. Blake, even if we had someone, $10,000 for 3 hours of work," Harrison said flatly, "plus whatever you need to cover their shift." The number hung between them, more than most staff made in 3 months. Let me ask around," Marcus said carefully. As the manager disappeared, Harrison paced near the bar, cycling through increasingly desperate scenarios. Translation app? Insulting. Reschedule? Shows weakness? English only? Li Chen had made clear that speaking her language was required respect. 5 years of work collapsing because of mechanical failure. His phone buzzed. His CFO, Gerald. "Any luck finding a replacement translator? Still looking. Prepare contingency plans." The response came immediately. "Harrison, there are no contingency plans. This deal is the contingency plan. 5 years of work, everything we've built toward. If this falls through, we're looking at layoffs, cancelled projects, and stockholder revolt. This is everything." He knew. Dear God, did he know? This partnership would take them beyond quarterly profits and stock prices. This was legacy, healthcare technology that could save millions of lives in rural Asia, where advanced diagnostics were inaccessible. For once in his carefully calculated career, Harrison actually cared about more than the money. This project mattered. This could mean something beyond his bank account. "Mr. Blake," Marcus returned, apologetic. "I've asked everyone. 3 Spanish speakers, 2 Korean, 1 French, nobody with professional Mandarin. I'm truly sorry." Harrison felt something he hadn't experienced since betting everything on his first startup at 22. Genuine fear, not calculated risk, actual terror that everything was falling apart and he couldn't stop it. "What about customers?" he asked desperately. "Someone here must—" 20,000! Harrison interrupted himself. 20,000 for 3 hours. Someone in this restaurant must speak Mandarin. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Would you really trust a major negotiation to a complete stranger?" "I don't have a choice." Harrison's voice rose, drawing glances. He forced calm. "I don't have a choice. 3 hours. That's all I need." His phone buzzed. Li Chen's vehicle spotted. ETA 45 minutes. 45 minutes to solve an impossible problem or watch 5 years disappear. Elena Morrison had been refilling water glasses when she first overheard the desperate man near the bar. She'd noticed him immediately. Someone who carried themselves like they owned the world, wearing a suit worth more than her monthly rent, radiating anxiety that suggested something major unraveling. 7 years in upscale restaurants had taught Elena a crucial survival skill: how to be functionally invisible. Wealthy diners preferred servers present but unseen, helpful but silent. You filled glasses without eye contact, delivered meals without comment, disappeared into the background like smoke. You absolutely didn't listen to conversations, even when they happened 15 feet away, in voices that weren't quite as quiet as the speakers believed. And you definitely never interrupted, but Mandarin. The desperate man had said Mandarin. Elena's hand trembled slightly as she poured water, trying to focus on her work and not the increasingly frantic conversation near the bar. It wasn't her business. He was clearly important, clearly desperate, clearly operating in a world so far above her economic reality that it might as well be another planet. "Elena." Marcus appeared beside her suddenly, voice low and urgent. "I need to ask you something strange." She looked up, pitcher in hand. "What's wrong? Do you speak any languages besides English?" Her stomach dropped. She knew exactly where this was headed. "Marcus, the gentleman at the bar, Mr. Blake, will pay $20,000 for someone who can translate Mandarin for 3 hours." "I heard," Elena admitted quietly. Marcus's eyes widened. "You speak Mandarin?" "Yes, but I'm not a professional translator." I lived in Shanghai for 2 years after college, teaching English and picked up the language. But this man is talking about a business meeting. Important people, technical terminology. I'm not qualified. $20,000, Elena. Nearly 8 months of your salary. She knew. God, she knew exactly what $20,000 meant to someone in her situation. It would completely pay off her younger brother Danny's remaining college loans, the debt that haunted both of them, that made him work nights at a convenience store while trying to maintain his grades. It would give her breathing room to enroll in a single class herself, maybe update her linguistics degree that had been gathering dust since the economic crash eliminated every entry-level position she'd qualified for 7 years ago. It would mean she could stop working doubles every weekend, stop calculating down to the penny whether she could afford new work shoes or if the current ones had to last another 3 months. $20,000 wasn't just money. It was possibility. It was hope. It was the difference between treading water and maybe, finally, getting ahead. But Mr. Blake wasn't offering charity. He needed something professional, polished, perfect. She was just a waitress who'd learned Mandarin from necessity, not prestigious universities. What if she embarrassed him? What if she misunderstood critical business terminology? What if she was the reason his important meeting failed? Marcus, I don't think... Just talk to him, Marcus urged. Let him decide if you're qualified. What do you have to lose? Everything, Elena thought. The comfortable invisibility that had protected her for 7 years. She could expose herself to judgment, to dismissal, to confirmation that she was exactly what she appeared. Just another server. Nothing special, nothing valuable beyond her ability to carry plates without dropping them. But $20,000. And a man who looked like his world was collapsing, who needed help she might possibly be able to provide. Okay, she heard herself say, voice sounding distant in her own ears. I'll talk to him. But Marcus, if he asks me questions I can't answer, I'm going to be honest about my limitations. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. That's all I'm asking, Marcus said, relief flooding his expression. Just be yourself. Be honest. That's all anyone can ask. As she walked toward the bar, water pitcher still clutched like a shield, Elena caught her reflection in the mirror behind the rows of expensive liquor bottles. 28 years old. Hair pulled back in the required neat braid that every server wore, standard white shirt and black pants that marked her as staff, as someone meant to serve and then disappear. A face that was pleasant enough but entirely unremarkable. The kind of face that customers looked past 1,000 times without ever really seeing the person behind it. This was absolutely a mistake. She should turn around right now, go back to her tables, stay in her lane, remain invisible and safe. But the desperate man received another message, and the raw panic that crossed his face was so human that Elena found herself speaking before she could stop. "Excuse me, sir. I'm told you need someone who speaks Mandarin?" Harrison Blake turned, and Elena suddenly understood what it meant to be truly seen by someone who normally looked straight through people like her. His eyes were sharp, assessing, desperate, and she recognized something, the terror of being out of control. "You speak Mandarin?" Doubt and hope mixed in his voice. "Yes, sir. I'm not a professional translator, but I lived in Shanghai for 2 years, and I'm fluent in conversational and business Mandarin." He studied her, uniform, hands gripping the pitcher, face betraying every ounce of nervousness. "I need someone for 3 hours. A very important meeting. Can you handle business negotiations? Technical terminology?" Elena should be honest. Tell him she'd learned Mandarin teaching kindergarten, navigating markets, talking with neighbors. Admit her expertise was daily conversation, not corporate jargon, but she thought about Danny's loan payments, her own linguistics degree she'd never been able to use. 7 years of invisibility. "I can handle it," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "I'll do my best." Harrison Blake stared at her for what felt like eternity. Then slowly he nodded. "What's your name?" "Elena Morrison, sir." "Elena Morrison. You might have just saved my life. Harrison Blake led Eleanor to a quiet corner near the entrance, away from curious eyes. His hand shook as he pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes with frantic energy. We have 40 minutes, maybe less. I need to brief you on everything. The investor, the deal, the cultural protocols. Mr. Blake, Eleanor interrupted gently. I need you to take a breath. If you're panicking, I'll panic, and if we're both panicking, this meeting is over before it starts. Harrison stared at her. When was the last time someone had told him to calm down? But she was right. He forced himself to breathe. This is the most important meeting of my career, and I'm putting it in the hands of someone I don't know. I understand, Eleanor said. I'm terrified too, but we'll do our best. So tell me, who's the investor? Li Chen, one of the most powerful venture capitalists in China. Made her fortune in pharmaceutical manufacturing. She's known for brilliant business instincts, absolute cultural traditionalism, and zero tolerance for disrespect. What does she consider disrespectful? Being late, speaking English when you should speak Mandarin, treating service staff poorly, focusing on money before relationships. Elena nodded. What's the deal? Healthcare diagnostic technology. My company developed a portable device that can perform complex medical tests in remote locations, blood work, disease screening, early cancer detection. Solar-powered, costs a fraction of traditional equipment. Li Chen's network could get it into rural Chinese provinces where millions lack healthcare access. Eleanor's nervousness shifted. Interest sparked in her eyes. That could save countless lives. That's the idea, but only if I can convince Li Chen I'm worth partnering with. What do I need to know about translation protocols? Eleanor asked, and Harrison could hear the determination replacing fear in her voice. Harrison pulled up his notes, pages of guidance Richard had compiled over 20 years. The key is translating intent, not just words. Business Mandarin is formal, indirect, layered with cultural meaning. Americans are direct, casual. If I say, this deal could be profitable, you don't translate literally. You say, this partnership might bring mutual benefit to both our respected organizations. More formal, more humble, collective success over individual gain. Exactly, Harrison said, impressed by how quickly she grasped the nuance. And if Li Chen says something that sounds like a simple compliment, it might actually be a test to see how you respond. If she says something that sounds like criticism, it might be her way of showing she's genuinely paying attention and cares about the details. Nothing is ever quite what it seems on the surface. Elena nodded, and Harrison noticed she was no longer clutching the water pitcher like a shield. Her posture had straightened. Her eyes were focused, alert, engaged. Whatever fear she'd shown earlier was being pushed down, controlled, channeled into concentration. Maybe this desperate gamble could actually work. What else do I need to know? Elena asked. Don't translate everything simultaneously, Harrison explained. In Chinese business culture, there are pauses, silences. They're not awkward. They're thoughtful, respectful, meaningful. If Li Chen takes 10 seconds to consider before speaking, that's completely normal. Don't feel like you need to fill the space. Respect the silence. Let thoughts breathe, Elena repeated, as if committing it to memory. And Elena? Harrison met her eyes directly, willing her to understand how crucial this was. If you don't understand something, a technical word, a cultural phrase, any reference at all, tell me immediately. Don't guess. Don't improvise. Don't try to fake it. We stop, we clarify, we figure it out together, we get it right. Honesty about limitations is infinitely better than confident mistakes. I can do that, Elena said, and Harrison believed her. I can be honest about what I don't know. His phone buzzed. Li Chen's vehicle pulling into parking. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. His entire future compressed into 120 seconds. She's here, he said, voice trembling. Eleanor straightened her shirt, took a breath. Then let's meet her. Li Chen's entrance was a masterclass in understated power. No entourage of assistants, no bodyguards creating drama, no photographers capturing her arrival. She simply walked through the restaurant doors at precisely the scheduled time, not a minute early to seem overeager, not a minute late to demonstrate power, accompanied only by Wei Zhang, her chief of operations. Harrison recognized Wei from video calls, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, known throughout the industry for implementing Li Chen's strategic visions with ruthless precision. Li Chen herself was mid-50s, average height, but she carried herself with the kind of presence that had nothing to do with physical stature and everything to do with absolute confidence earned over decades of succeeding in male-dominated industries. She wore a tailored navy suit that was clearly expensive but deliberately understated. No designer labels screaming for attention, no flashy accessories. Simple, elegant hairstyle. No dramatic jewelry, no luxury handbag announcing wealth. Everything about her presentation said, "I have nothing to prove because everyone who matters already knows exactly who I am." Harrison stepped forward, feeling his heart hammer against his ribs, and Elena moved smoothly to his right side, close enough to translate effectively, far enough to be respectful of his position as the primary negotiator. "Ms. Li," Harrison said, bowing slightly in the manner Richard had taught him years ago during his first cultural training session. "Thank you for making time in your schedule to meet with me. I'm deeply honored by your presence." Before Eleanor could begin translating, Li Chen's eyes shifted to her, not hostile, but intensely observant, studying, assessing, processing information with the sharp attention of someone who noticed absolutely everything and forgot nothing of importance. It was the look of a woman who had built a fortune by reading people better than they read themselves. Elena met her gaze directly, respectful but not subservient, present but not presumptuous, and spoke in Mandarin. Harrison, who couldn't understand the words, could only hope she was conveying the right balance of formality and authenticity. Li Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered, interest, calculation. She responded in measured Mandarin. Elena translated, "Ms. Li says she's pleased to meet you and appreciates your respect for her time. She asks about traffic from your office." Small talk, the beginning ritual. Harrison had studied this. "Traffic was manageable. I hope your hotel has been comfortable." Elena translated smoothly. Li Chen responded, "Ms. Li says the hotel is excellent, though she prefers Seattle rain to Beijing pollution." A small joke. Good sign. Marcus appeared. "Your table is ready. Please follow me." The private section was perfect. Round table positioned in an alcove with windows overlooking a garden, rain pattering against glass. Soft lighting, privacy without isolation. Li Chen took the seat facing the windows, the position of honor. Wei Zhang sat to her right, Harrison to Li Chen's left. Elena positioned herself slightly behind, where she could hear both clearly. A server appeared, someone Marcus had clearly briefed about the critical importance of this particular table. "May I offer you something to drink to begin your meal?" Elena translated the question into Mandarin before Harrison could respond, a small but significant choice. She understood instinctively that Li Chen, as the honored guest, should be addressed first, rather than having the question directed to Harrison as the host. Smart, culturally aware, exactly right. Li Chen spoke, and Eleanor translated with careful precision. "Ms. Li would enjoy tea if you have quality oolong. Otherwise, water is perfectly acceptable." "Say we have an excellent Taiwanese oolong," the server responded, and Harrison saw him stand a little straighter, proud of the restaurant's authentic selection. Li Chen's expression transformed. Her first genuine smile, not the polite, neutral expression she'd worn since arriving, but something real that reached her eyes. She spoke in Mandarin, and this time her words came with more warmth, more length, more emotion. Elena translated, and Harrison heard her voice shift to match that warmth. Ms. Lee says that if you truly have Taiwanese oolong, the real variety, not an American approximation, then you're the first American restaurant she's visited in 5 years that understands the profound difference between Chinese tea cultures. She says this attention to authentic detail is impressive and suggests you understand that respect is found in genuine effort, not performative gestures. Harrison felt a surge of profound gratitude toward Marcus for maintaining such an authentic tea selection, and toward Richard for having mentioned in his meticulous cultural notes that Li Chen appreciated genuine touches over showy displays. This single choice, real Taiwanese oolong instead of generic Chinese tea, had communicated more respect than 1,000 words could have. "I'll have the same. Ms. Wei, please order whatever you prefer." Once the server left, Li Chen spoke directly to Elena. Elena responded in Mandarin, then translated. "Ms. Li asked where I learned Mandarin. I told her Shanghai, teaching elementary children. She said my accent suggests Pudong district. That's very specific." "It is. And she's right." Li Chen spoke again, eyes shifting between them. Elena translated. "Ms. Li says it's interesting your regular translator wasn't available for such an important meeting. She asks if this is common in American business, using whoever happens to be nearby when plans change." There it was, the first test. Harrison could lie. "Or be honest. Please tell Ms. Li that my translator had an emergency this morning and couldn't travel from Boston. I attempted to find a professional replacement, but everyone qualified was committed elsewhere. I was desperate and unprepared, which is disrespectful to someone of Ms. Li's stature." Elena offered to help. "While she's not a professional translator, I hope Ms. Li will be patient as we do our best to communicate respectfully." Elena translated, longer in Mandarin, more formal, carefully structured. Li Chen was silent for a long moment. Wei Jiang glanced at her boss, waiting. Then Li Chen spoke. Tone shifted. Less testing, more genuine. Elena translated, "Ms. Li says honesty about circumstances is more valuable than perfect presentation that hides truth. She appreciates you didn't try to deceive her. She says the most important quality in a business partner is not having no problems, but being honest when problems occur." Harrison felt something unclench. "Please tell Ms. Li I'm grateful for her understanding." But before Elena could translate, Li Chen raised her hand slightly and spoke directly to Harrison in accented but clear English. "Mr. Blake, I speak English well enough to understand business conversations, but I prefer Mandarin because it shows respect for my culture and because words in your native language reveal more authentic truth. Please continue with Elena translating. But no, I will understand much even before translation." Harrison's mind reeled. She'd spoken English all along. Every word he'd said since she arrived, she'd understood. Every nervous comment to Elena, every moment of panic, every honest admission, she'd heard it all. The test wasn't just about translation. It was about his character, his honesty, his behavior when he thought she couldn't understand. And somehow, impossibly, he'd passed. Not because he'd been perfect, but because he'd been honest about being imperfect. Elena met his eyes, and he saw the same realization. They'd been on stage from the moment Li Chen walked through the door. Every word had mattered. "Thank you for your patience, Ms. Li," Harrison said carefully, "and thank you for giving us the opportunity to demonstrate respect, even imperfectly." Elena translated, and Li Chen smiled genuinely. "Now," Li Chen said in Mandarin, "let us discuss your remarkable technology. I want to understand everything about how it works and why you believe it can make a difference in the lives of people who need it most." As Elena translated, Harrison pulled out his presentation materials, hands steady for the first time all day. The real meeting was finally beginning. Harrison pulled his tablet from his briefcase, hands steadier now. But as he opened his presentation, he realized something that made his breath catch. Every slide was in English. Charts, graphs, technical specifications, all designed for Richard to translate. Without his translator's medical expertise, these slides might as well be code. Eleanor leaned closer. What's wrong? The presentation. It's full of technical terms, medical jargon. I don't know if... Show me, Elena said quietly. Harrison angled the tablet toward her. Her eyes scanned quickly, concern flickering before she schooled it into determination. I can do this, she whispered. I taught English to medical students my second year in Shanghai. I know medical terminology, but if I'm uncertain about something, I'll tell you immediately. Harrison felt relief wash over him. Okay, let's do this. He turned back to Li Chen, who had been observing their exchange with that unreadable expression. She sipped her tea, waiting with the patience of someone who had conducted thousands of negotiations. Ms. Li, Harrison began, I'd like to show you what we've developed. But first, I want to explain why this technology matters to me personally. Li Chen's eyebrows raised slightly. Surprise. Americans typically led with numbers, not emotions. Elena translated, and Li Chen gestured for him to continue. 5 years ago, I attended a medical conference in rural Sichuan province, Harrison said, and the memory still carried weight even now. I met a doctor there who was serving a community of 15,000 people with equipment that belonged in a museum. She showed me children dying from treatable infections because she couldn't perform basic blood tests to identify the right antibiotics. Mothers dying in childbirth because she had no way to screen for complications during pregnancy. Elena translated, her voice carrying the emotion Harrison felt. He noticed she didn't just translate his words, she conveyed his tone, his intention, the genuine pain he'd felt witnessing that suffering. Li Chen leaned forward slightly, listening, really listening. That doctor told me, Harrison continued, we don't need fancy hospitals here. We just need the ability to see what's wrong so we can treat it. That conversation changed my entire career trajectory. I stopped chasing the next profitable app and started asking, what if we could make medical diagnostics portable, affordable, and simple enough for anyone to use? He pulled up the first technical slide showing the device. Sleek, tablet-sized, solar panel on the back, simple interface on the front. This is the result. 3 years of development, $200 million in research, and partnerships with medical technology experts across 4 continents. Elena translated the technical specifications as Harrison explained each feature. He watched her carefully, ready to slow down if she struggled, but she kept pace flawlessly. When he mentioned enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay capabilities, she translated it without hesitation, using what must have been the proper medical term in Mandarin. Li Chen asked her first substantive question, and Harrison heard the shift in her tone. From politely interested to professionally engaged, Elena translated Ms. Li asks how you ensure accuracy in diagnostic results without laboratory conditions and trained technicians. She says portable technology often sacrifices precision for convenience. Harrison had prepared for this question for 3 years. The device uses AI-assisted analysis with a 97.3% accuracy rate compared to standard laboratory tests. It doesn't replace trained medical professionals. It extends their reach into areas where they can't physically be present. Here's the validation data from our clinical trials. He showed slide after slide of test results, comparison studies, peer-reviewed research. Elena translated the complex medical terminology with a confidence that surprised even Harrison. She'd understated her capabilities. This wasn't just conversational Mandarin, this was professional-level translation. Li Chen asked another question, longer this time, with technical nuance that made Harrison's heart race. Elena translated, Ms. Li wants to know about the device's performance in extreme conditions. She mentions that rural Chinese provinces experience temperature ranges from -40 Celsius in winter to +40 in summer. often with high humidity and dust. American technology frequently fails in these environments because designers only test for American climate conditions. Harrison felt a bead of sweat form on his temple. This was the critical question, the one that could make or break the entire negotiation. Their testing had been extensive, but had it been extensive enough? "We conducted field testing in 7 different climate zones," Harrison said carefully, "including Inner Mongolia in winter and Guangdong in summer. The device is rated for operation between -30 and +50 Celsius, with dust protection rated IP67. However," he paused, knowing that what he was about to admit could end the conversation. "However, we haven't yet tested in every possible extreme scenario. Our testing was thorough, but not exhaustive. I can't promise perfection in absolutely every environment. What I can promise is that we'll conduct additional testing in any specific regions, Ms. Lee is considering for deployment and will modify the design if needed to ensure reliability," Elena translated, and Harrison held his breath. He'd just admitted a limitation to one of the most demanding investors in the world. Either she'd respect his honesty or she'd see it as inadequate preparation. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Harrison remembered what he'd told Elena about respecting the silence, but right now it felt less like cultural protocol and more like slowly drowning. Finally, Li Chen spoke, and her words came with something that might have been approval. Elena translated, "Ms. Lee says most American businessmen would have lied and claimed their testing was complete. She appreciates your honesty about limitations. She says a partner who admits what they don't know is more valuable than a partner who pretends to know everything." Harrison felt his shoulders relax for the first time since the presentation began. "Please tell Ms. Lee that I learned from an excellent teacher that honesty builds bridges, while deception builds walls," Elena translated, and for the first time Li Chen smiled directly at Harrison, not the polite smile of social protocol, but something genuine. The negotiation continued for another hour. Li Chen asked probing questions about manufacturing costs, distribution logistics, regulatory approvals in China, training protocols for users. Each question was sharper than the last, designed to expose any weakness in Harrison's planning, and Elena translated every single one flawlessly. Medical terminology, business jargon, cultural nuances. She navigated it all with a grace that made Harrison wonder how she'd ended up serving tables instead of working in international business. But he also noticed something else, how Li Chen watched Elena. Not with suspicion or judgment, but with something that looked almost like recognition, as if she saw something in this young woman that resonated with her own journey. The food arrived, an impeccably prepared tasting menu that Marcus had designed specifically for this meeting, but Harrison barely tasted any of it. He was too focused on the conversation, on reading Li Chen's reactions, on the delicate dance of negotiation that could change his company's entire future. During a natural pause in the discussion, while they waited for the next course, Li Chen spoke directly to Elena, not in English this time, but in Mandarin. Her tone was conversational rather than formal, and Harrison noticed Elena's surprised reaction. They spoke for perhaps 30 seconds, and Harrison resisted the urge to interrupt and ask what they were discussing. This was clearly a private exchange, and interrupting would be culturally inappropriate. Finally, Eleanor turned to Harrison, and he saw something in her expression he couldn't quite read. "Ms. Lee wanted to know about my background. I told her about teaching in Shanghai, about coming back to the States, and finding that my degree didn't translate into job opportunities during the economic downturn. Elena paused, clearly moved. She said she started her career selling medical supplies door to door because no one would give a woman a position in management. She said sometimes the path to where we're meant to be is not a straight line." Harrison looked at Li Chen with new understanding. Here was a woman who had built an empire despite every barrier society had placed in her way. And she was having a moment of connection with Elena, another woman whose talents had been overlooked by a system that judged worth by job titles rather than capabilities. "Ms. Lee," Harrison said carefully, "I hope you'll forgive me for saying something personal. But watching Elena perform today, her professionalism, her skill, her grace under pressure when I was panicking, has made me realize something I'm ashamed to admit. I've walked past talented people every day for years, never seeing their potential because I was too focused on credentials and resumes. Elena has taught me more about true capability in 3 hours than I've learned in 20 years of business." Elena stared at him, clearly not expecting such a public acknowledgement. She translated his words into Mandarin, and Harrison noticed her voice wavered slightly with emotion. Li Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying Harrison with those sharp, assessing eyes. Then she spoke, and her words carried weight. Elena translated, and her voice was thick with feeling. "Ms. Lee says you have revealed your true character today, Mr. Blake, not through your presentation, which was excellent, but through how you treated someone you thought was beneath your social status. She says in China, we have an old proverb. You can know the worth of a man by observing how he treats the waiter, not how he treats the emperor. Today, she has seen how you treat the waiter. And she has seen that the waiter possesses skills you desperately needed and valued her contribution, despite never expecting to need her." Li Chen continued speaking, and Elena's translation grew more emotional with each word. "Ms. Lee says many wealthy men talk about respecting workers, but few actually do it when they believe no one important is watching. You didn't know she spoke English. You didn't know she was testing your character. You were simply honest and respectful because that is who you are. That quality matters more in a business partner than any technology or profit projection." Harrison felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a business negotiation anymore. This was something deeper, a recognition of shared values, of mutual respect, of understanding that transcended cultures and languages. "Ms. Lee," Harrison said, his voice steady but sincere, "would you be willing to move forward with a partnership? Not because my technology is perfect, we both know it needs refinement, but because I believe we share a common purpose, using business success to serve people who desperately need help." Elena translated, and then all three of them, Harrison, Elena, and Li Chen, waited in silence for what felt like the longest moment of Harrison's entire career. Li Chen picked up her tea, sipped it slowly, set it down with deliberate precision. When she finally spoke, her words were measured and clear. Elena translated. "Miss Lee says she came to Seattle prepared to meet with 3 different potential partners. You were the first meeting. She says she's canceling the other 2 meetings because she's found the partner she was looking for. She would like to discuss preliminary terms, and if you're in agreement, she'll have her legal team begin drafting partnership documents." Harrison's vision went slightly blurry. His hands shook as he set down his own tea. 5 years of work, 5 years of hoping and planning and building toward this exact moment. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." Li Chen smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, and extended her hand across the table. Not a bow, not a formal protocol, a handshake, Western style, a gesture of equals meeting as partners. Harrison took her hand, and as they shook, he felt the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. Richard's emergency landing, his desperate search for a translator, Elena's courage in stepping forward despite her fear, his own choice to be honest rather than perfect. Every element had been necessary, every challenge had been a test, and somehow, impossibly, he'd passed them all. The meal concluded with the kind of warm formality that marked successful negotiations. Li Chen and Wei Jiang departed with promises to have legal teams connect within 24 hours. Marcus appeared to personally escort them to their car, ever the consummate professional. And then it was just Harrison and Elena standing in the now empty private dining area, both of them still processing what had just happened. Harrison turned to Elena, and for the first time since this chaotic day had begun, he allowed himself to really look at her, not as a desperate solution to an impossible problem, not as a translator performing a function, but as a person, a remarkably talented person who had just saved his entire career. "Elena," he said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite control, "I don't even know how to begin thanking you." Elena shook her head, and he noticed her hands were trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "You don't need to thank me. You're paying me $20,000. That's more than enough." "No," Harrison said firmly, "it's not nearly enough. What you did in there, that wasn't just translation. That was professional-level interpretation under impossible pressure. You saved a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You deserve far more than what we agreed on." Elena looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Mr. Blake, I was just doing what you asked me to do. I translated your words into Mandarin, that's all." "That's not all," Harrison insisted. "You navigated complex medical terminology. You understood business nuance. You read cultural cues I completely missed. You connected with Li Chen on a level that had nothing to do with my presentation and everything to do with your own authenticity and intelligence." Elena was quiet for a moment, and Harrison saw something complex moving across her face. Not quite discomfort, but something close to it, as if she wasn't used to being seen this clearly, and the visibility made her vulnerable. "Can I ask you something?" Harrison said gently. "Of course. How does someone with your capabilities end up working as a server? Not that there's anything wrong with that profession, but you could be doing so much more." Elena's expression closed slightly, protective walls sliding into place. "You'd be surprised how hard it is to get a job when your only work experience is teaching English in China, and your degree is from a state school nobody's heard of. Every position I applied for wanted 3 years of corporate experience. But I couldn't get corporate experience without someone giving me a first chance, so I took the job that was available, serving tables, and I told myself it was temporary." "How long have you been telling yourself that?" Harrison asked quietly. 7 years, Elena admitted, and her voice carried the weight of those years. 7 years of temporary that became permanent because I stopped believing anyone would see past my resume to what I could actually do. Harrison felt something tighten in his chest. How many talented people were out there, overlooked and underutilized, because the hiring systems were built to value credentials over capabilities? How many Elenas had he personally passed over because their resume didn't fit the predetermined template? "I want to offer you a position," Harrison said, "not out of charity or guilt, but because I desperately need someone with your skills." Elena's eyes widened. "What kind of position?" "My company is about to embark on the biggest international expansion we've ever attempted. We'll be working with Chinese partners, navigating cultural protocols, translating technical medical information, building relationships across language barriers. I need someone who can do all of that, and you just proved you can." "I'm not a professional translator," Elena protested. I was terrified the entire time. I kept waiting for Li Chen to realize I had no idea what I was doing." "But you did know what you were doing," Harrison countered. "You navigated that negotiation better than Richard would have, and he's been doing this for 20 years. You have something he doesn't. You understand what it's like to be underestimated. That connection you made with Li Chen, that wasn't about language skills. That was about recognizing another woman who had to fight for every opportunity." Elena bit her lip, clearly torn. What would the salary be? 80,000 to start, with full benefits, plus performance bonuses tied to successful negotiations. "If this Chinese partnership goes as well as I think it will, you could be looking at 6 figures within a year." Elena's breath caught. 80,000. That's more than 3 times what I make now. It's what the position is worth. It's what you're worth." Harrison pulled out his phone. "Give me your number. My HR director will call you tomorrow to discuss details, but I want you to think seriously about this. Don't dismiss it just because it seems too good to be true." Elena slowly recited her number, and Harrison saved it immediately, as if afraid she might disappear if he didn't anchor her somehow to this moment. "Mr. Blake," Elena said carefully, "can I ask you something? Please, call me Harrison. And yes, ask me anything. Why are you doing this, really? Is it because you feel guilty about how you treated me before, like I was invisible until you needed something from me?" The question hit harder than Elena probably intended, but it was fair, brutally fair. "Yes," Harrison admitted, "partly it's guilt. I hate that I've spent years walking past talented people without seeing them. But it's also something Li Chen said that I can't stop thinking about. She said, you can know a man's worth by how he treats the waiter. Well, I want to be the kind of man who doesn't just treat the waiter well. I want to be the kind of man who recognizes when the waiter should be sitting at the table as an equal." Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Think about whether you want to keep telling yourself this serving job is temporary or whether you want to take a chance on something more." Before Elena could respond, Marcus appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Elena, you're still technically on shift for another 2 hours. If you're feeling up to it, I could use you covering Section 3. We're unexpectedly short-staffed." Elena looked between Marcus and Harrison, clearly torn between two worlds, the familiar safety of the job she knew and the terrifying possibility of something more. "Go," Harrison said gently. "We'll talk tomorrow. But Elena, thank you, not just for today, but for showing me what real capability looks like." Elena nodded, unable to speak, and hurried after Marcus. Harrison stood alone in the private dining area, surrounded by the remnants of the meal that had changed everything. His phone buzzed. A text from his CFO. "Li Chen's team just sent preliminary framework. They want to move fast. This is really happening." Yes, Harrison thought, this is really happening. But as he gathered his things and prepared to leave, his mind wasn't on the hundreds of millions of dollars Li Chen was investing, or the lives their technology would save, or even the professional triumph he'd just achieved. His mind was on a young woman who had spent 7 years being invisible, who had stepped forward despite her fear, who had proven that talent and capability existed in people and places he'd never thought to look. And he made himself a promise. He would never stop looking for the invisible, talented people. Never stop questioning whether his hiring practices were designed to find the best people or just to find people who looked like they should be the best. That evening, Harrison sat in his downtown office overlooking Seattle's skyline, typing an email to his entire executive team. The words came easier than he expected. "Today, I learned an uncomfortable truth about myself and our company. We have built systems that reward credentials over capabilities, pedigrees over performance, familiarity over fresh perspectives. We tell ourselves we're hiring the best people, but we're actually only hiring from the pool of people who had access to elite education and professional networks. Starting immediately, I want us to reimagine our hiring practices. Remove university names from resumes during initial screening. Focus on demonstrated skills rather than previous job titles. Create opportunities for people who might not have traditional backgrounds, but who have the intelligence, work ethic, and capabilities we actually need. Today, I met someone who saved a $500 million deal using skills she developed teaching English abroad and serving tables to pay rent. Someone none of us would have interviewed based on her resume. That person is now joining our team, and she's going to help us see what we've been missing. It's time we stopped looking for people who fit our predetermined molds and started finding people who can actually do the work that matters." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Within minutes, his phone began buzzing with responses from executives. some enthusiastic, some skeptical, all surprised that Harrison Blake was suddenly championing systemic change. Let them be surprised, Harrison thought. He'd been surprised too, surprised by how much talent existed in unexpected places, surprised by how easily he'd almost missed it, surprised by how much one honest conversation could change everything. His phone rang. Li Chen's number. "Miss Li," he answered, slightly nervous despite the successful meeting. "Harrison," she said in English, her accent warm, "I wanted to call personally. Not about the contract, my lawyers will handle that. I wanted to tell you something more important." "Of course." "Today, you showed me something rare in business. You showed me that you could learn and change in real time. When you realized Elena was more capable than you'd assumed, you didn't diminish her contribution to protect your ego. You elevated it. You recognized it publicly. That quality, the ability to see your own blindness and correct it, that's what makes a good partner into a great partner." Harrison felt his throat tighten. "Thank you. That means more than you know. I want you to know I will be watching how you treat Elena in the coming months. If she truly joins your team, if she truly receives the opportunities you promised, then I will know our partnership has a foundation of integrity. But if she becomes just another person you use and forget, then I will know I misjudged your character." The words weren't a threat, exactly, but they were a clear expectation. Li Chen was holding him accountable to the values he demonstrated today. "I understand," Harrison said, "and I promise you Elena will receive every opportunity she's earned, not because you're watching, but because it's the right thing to do." "Good," Li Chen said. "Then I think we will do great things together. Not just in business, but in showing others a better way to see talent." After they hung up, Harrison sat in silence, watching the city lights flicker on as evening settled over Seattle. Somewhere out there, Elena was finishing her shift, probably exhausted, possibly questioning whether today had even been real. Tomorrow, his HR director would call her. They would discuss salary, benefits, start dates. They would make it official. But tonight, Harrison simply sat with the weight of this day and everything it had revealed about himself, both his failures and his possibilities. He'd almost missed her, almost walked right past someone extraordinary because she didn't fit his narrow definition of where talent should be found, and that thought would stay with him forever. Because the scariest question wasn't how many talented people he'd finally noticed. The scariest question was, how many had he already missed? 3 months later, Eleanor Morrison stood in the conference room on Blake Technologies' 45th floor, looking out at Seattle's skyline from a perspective she'd only seen from the ground. Everything was different from up here. She wore a tailored blazer, professional, purchased with her first real paycheck. Her tablet contained preparation notes for a video conference with Li Chen's team in Beijing. "You ready?" Harrison appeared with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, the good coffee from the executive floor. "As ready as I'll ever be," Elena said, "though I still get nervous before these calls." "Good," Harrison said. "The day you stop being nervous is the day you stop caring." The conference room filled. Gerald, Patricia, Charles. 3 months ago, Elena would have been invisible to them. Now they valued her contribution. Li Chen appeared on screen from Shanghai. "Good morning, Ms. Li," Elena responded in Mandarin, more confident now than during that first terrifying meeting. They conducted the meeting flawlessly. Elena translated technical specifications and cultural nuances, but more importantly, contributed her own insights. When a disagreement arose about marketing, Elena spoke up. "May I offer a perspective? The American team focuses on individual success stories. The Chinese team emphasizes collective benefit. We need messaging that honors both values." Her solution incorporated both perspectives. Patricia made notes. Gerald nodded. Charles smiled with respect. 3 months ago, her suggestions would have been dismissed. Now, people listened. Not because she'd suddenly become smarter, she'd always been capable, but because she was finally visible. After the call, Harrison asked Elena to walk with him. They rode down in comfortable silence. Harrison led her not to his car, but toward Westlake Prime, the restaurant where everything had changed. "I haven't been back since that day," Elena admitted. "That's exactly why we need to go," Harrison said. Marcus greeted them warmly. They sat in the main dining room. A young server approached. "Good afternoon. Can I start you with something to drink?" "What's your name?" Elena asked gently. "Thomas, ma'am." "What are you studying?" "International relations." "I'm hoping to work in diplomacy, but jobs are hard to come by." Elena pulled out her business card. "Send me your resume. We're looking for talented people who understand how to navigate different cultures." Thomas stared at the card. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. And Thomas, don't apologize for working here while building towards something more." After Thomas left, Harrison smiled. "You're doing it." Seeing the invisible people, Elena's throat tightened. "Someone saw me when I was invisible. How could I not do the same?" Their lunch was contemplative. Harrison told her about the changes he'd been implementing company-wide. Blind resume screening, skills-based hiring assessments, partnerships with community colleges, and alternative education programs. Not all the executives were supportive. Some thought he was being naive, idealistic, too focused on social good instead of profit margins. "But here's what they don't understand," Harrison said, setting down his fork with emphasis. "Finding talented people in unexpected places isn't charity. It's good business. You've proven that better than any argument I could make. Since you joined the team, our Chinese partnership has exceeded every projection. Li-Chen trusts us more because she trusts you. That trust is worth millions." "It's not really about me, though," Elena said thoughtfully. "It's about what I represent. Li-Chen didn't invest in your company because of the technology. Plenty of companies have similar technology. She invested because she saw that you were willing to change, to learn, to recognize value in places you'd been taught not to look." "Dom, and you taught me that," Harrison said, his voice carrying genuine emotion. "That morning when you stepped forward, terrified but brave, you showed me what courage actually looks like. It's not about having no fear. It's about acting despite the fear because something matters more than your own comfort." Elena thought about that day. The water pitcher clutched in her shaking hands, the decision to speak up when every instinct told her to stay quiet and invisible. She'd been so afraid of embarrassing herself, of proving she wasn't good enough, of being dismissed. But she'd done it anyway, and in doing so, she'd changed not just her own life, but Harrison's entire perspective on where talent exists. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Elena asked quietly. "Of course. When I came back from China 7 years ago, I applied for 43 jobs. 43. Every single one of them required previous corporate experience or relevant professional background. None of them would even interview me. After the 20th rejection, I started to believe what the system was telling me, that teaching English abroad wasn't real work. That my degree from a state school meant I wasn't as smart as people from prestigious universities. That I was meant to be invisible." Her voice wavered slightly. "I started believing I didn't deserve to be seen. And that belief is what kept me invisible more than any hiring manager's decision. I made myself small because I thought that's what I was supposed to be." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the pain in her words. "And now? Now I'm learning that my worth isn't determined by whether other people see it. My capabilities existed before you needed a translator. My intelligence existed before I walked into that conference room. What changed wasn't me. What changed was that I was finally in a position where those qualities could be visible." "No," Harrison said gently, reaching across the table, but stopping just short of touching her hand, respecting her space. "What changed was that you decided you were worth being seen. When Marcus asked if you spoke Mandarin, you could have stayed silent, could have let your fear protect you from potential failure. But you chose to step forward. That choice, that single moment of courage, That's what changed everything. Elena felt tears prickling her eyes. I'm terrified I'll wake up and this will all be gone, that it's too good to be true. It's not too good to be true, Harrison said firmly. It's what you've earned, not because of one lucky day, but because you spent 7 years developing skills, maintaining dignity despite difficult circumstances, refusing to let invisibility make you bitter or small. You were ready for this opportunity because you'd been preparing for it without even knowing it. Thomas returned with their drinks, his hands steadier now, but his eyes still showing the shock of unexpected possibility. Elena knew that feeling too. The disorienting moment when someone sees potential in you that you'd stopped believing existed. After they finished lunch, Harrison walked Elena back to the office, but they paused on the sidewalk outside Blake Technologies. You know what I think about most? Harrison said, looking up at the building he'd built. Not the deals we've closed or the money we've made. I think about how many talented people I walked past for 20 years. How many Elenas were serving my coffee, parking my car, cleaning my office, people with extraordinary capabilities that I never saw because I'd been taught to only look for talent in certain places. You can't change the past, Elena said softly. No, but I can change the future, and so can you. Harrison met her eyes directly. Every person you mentor, every opportunity you create for someone who reminds you of who you used to be, that's how we change the system that made us both invisible to each other for so long. Elena thought about Thomas, nervously serving their lunch while hiding his graduate degree and diplomatic aspirations, about the hundreds of other talented people working jobs that didn't reflect their capabilities, waiting for someone to see them. About the woman she'd been 3 months ago, believing that invisibility was her permanent state. I won't forget, Elena said quietly. I won't forget what it feels like to be unseen, and I promise I'll spend the rest of my career making sure others don't stay invisible as long as I did. That's the real partnership Li Chen invested in, Harrison said. Not between our company and hers, but between people who understand that talent exists everywhere, and our job is to actually look for it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people stream past on the sidewalk, business people rushing to meetings, service workers heading to shifts, students hurrying to classes. Every single person with their own story, their own capabilities, their own potential to change everything if given the chance. You know what the biggest lesson is, Elena said finally. It's not about being seen. It's about seeing. Every time I walk past someone now, a janitor, a barista, a delivery driver, I ask myself, what am I missing? What extraordinary capabilities might be hidden behind a job title that society has taught me not to notice? And, Harrison asked, and I'm starting to realize that extraordinary is everywhere. We've just built systems that make it invisible. So we build new systems, Harrison replied. Better ones. Systems that look for capability instead of credentials, that value what people can do instead of where they learn to do it. It's going to take time, Elena said. Changing systems always does. Then we'd better start now, Harrison said. They walked back into Blake Technologies together. Not as employer and employee, not as savior and saved, but as partners united by a simple understanding that human potential is infinite, but only if we're willing to actually look for it in all the places we've been taught to ignore. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment, still the same apartment, though she could afford better now, and drafted an email to Thomas. She attached information about open positions at Blake Technologies, guidance on how to present unconventional experience as valuable, encouragement that his path was valid even if it didn't look like everyone else's. As she typed, she thought about the woman she'd been just 3 months ago. That woman had believed she was invisible, not because the world couldn't see her, but because she'd stopped believing she was worth seeing. She'd made herself small to fit into a system that measured worth by credentials instead of character, by pedigrees instead of potential. But that morning in the restaurant, water pitcher trembling in her hands, she'd made a different choice. She'd stepped forward. She'd been brave. And that single moment of courage had rippled outward in ways she never could have imagined. She hit send and thought about the chain of visibility that had started with her courage to speak up. Harrison had seen her. Li Chen had recognized her, and now she was seeing Thomas, and Thomas would one day see someone else. On and on, each act of recognition creating the possibility for the next. That was the real transformation. Not one person's success story, but a ripple of visibility spreading outward, challenging every assumption about where talent could be found and who deserved opportunities to prove their worth. Her phone buzzed. A text from Harrison. Thomas just sent his resume to HR. With your recommendation. This is how we change things. One person at a time. Elena smiled and typed back. No. This is how we change things, one choice at a time. The choice to look, the choice to see, the choice to believe that everyone deserves the chance to be visible. Because that was the real lesson she'd learned. Not that she'd been lucky to be discovered, but that she'd been brave enough to discover herself, to recognize her own worth even when the world told her she had none. And in doing so, she'd shown Harrison what he'd been missing all along. Not just one talented translator, but a whole world of invisible, extraordinary people waiting for someone to finally see them.